this is Cheryl McQueen, designer with Bello's Designs. With the holiday season, we all seem to run short of time. Today, we will talk about mass-producing cards without having them look mass-produced. We will look at how you can make a basic background that can be easily altered and made to look different while switching out a small number of stamps. Here is a couple of examples and some that I have made. And as we get into this, I will talk to you about how to prepare and how I created these cards. But first, let's look at some of the supplies that I'll be using today. We're going to use a multifarious card. We can take the Smooth and Supreme 7x7 cardstock and cut it to a 4 3/4 by 3.5 inch size. Then we will use a piece of cardstock and create a frame to go around our artwork. This card is going to be approximately 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches. Then we will create the base of our card by taking a piece of cardstock that is 8.5 by 11. We will cut it in half to create an 8.5 by 11 by 5.5 inch size that we will then fold in half. The stamps that I have used in my examples here today have been the Lavinia Fairy Fir Tree. This is number LAV 477. Also the Fir Tree, which is LAV 022. And then the two red pines, the small red pine, which is the LAV 592, and the large red pine, which is LAV 591. These will be the ones when I make a demonstration that we will use today. I also have several sentiment card stamps that I have used. I bought a little multi-pack of holiday and Christmas sentiments, so I will be using those as well. We will use our distress inks today. I'm going to use some of the basic classic colors. This is the new distress ink, Lumberjack Plaid. We'll be using chipped sapphire and pine needles. For our black ink, we will use the VersaFine Clair Nocturne. I'll be using my blending brushes for applying the color. And then I have a few optional little things that you can use, such as the Distress Oxide Spray, like was used on this particular one, and the liquid pearls that I used on the red. I'm also going to be using my stamping platform. I use it with a sticky grid on the base so that I don't have to use magnets. I just have my card stick to the base. I'm also going to use a stencil. This is a particular one, is one that I have just cut out. It's kind of hard to see here, but it is this one is actually one that I use for mountains. I'm trying to see if there's a way I can get that to show up. It's kind of hard. There we go. But I'm going to actually turn it on its side. You can use any stencil that you would like that has a basic design on it, or any other background that you'd like to. But this is the one that I'm going to use for our talk today. All right, so let's get started. So before we get started, let's talk about some basic hints. So what we are wanting to do is make it so that we can quickly make cards, basically mass producing them, but not have them look mass produced. So the first hint that I'd like to give you is that you need to go ahead and cut out your art card ahead of time. So usually my favorite size to use is the 4 3/4 by 3.5 inches. So just be sure and cut out a handful of your art cards. Then go ahead and cut out multiples of your frame as well. I actually recommend that you use the same color for your frames. That way it will make it a whole lot easier. So you can see with all of these I have used a black frame. cut out your cards as well. You can use different colors cardstocks. Once again, just remember that you're going to want to try and make it as simple as you can so that you can do your production pretty quickly. I try to just use a few colors that you can do very, very basically. So as you can see, this is all basically the same look, but I have done just one single color per card, and I have used the same stencil background design to make it so that I'm not having to constantly think about changing my design. So in doing that, I picked 3 basic colors to use for my cards that I'm going to mass produce. When you make your design and your background, just be sure to be very simple. Stick with only 2 or 3 of your stamps, like I'm going to be using this set of stamps like I did here, or being very basic with the same concept of different types of trees. So you will also want to, as I said before, make sure that you try and do the same or similar background and not have to stop and think about doing something different. Design ahead of time, prepare yourself ahead of time in all of your supplies, and then all you'll have to do is just start working. So let's go ahead and get started on making an example of the cards. So I'm going to go ahead and do this style like I've done on these cards before, and like I said, you can see that I've used the same stencil just in a little bit different ways. For example, on this particular card, we have a lot more of the color showing and leaving a smaller white border. Whereas on this card, same exact stencil, smaller amount of color, and we really punch up with the white. On this card, you can see I used the Distress Oxide spray to kind of give it a little bit of a kick. And as we talked about before, on this card I used the liquid pearls to give it just a little bit of a kick. Again, you want to keep your embellishments as something that's very basic as well. I also used water on the cards to give this little bit look of a snow or a starry effect on them. Alright, so the way I did this was very, very simple. I like to anchor my cards down when I'm doing stencils so that I don't get wiggle. So I always just take a little bit of tape and stick it down behind and stick it to my work surface. You obviously don't have to do that, but I find myself always, unfortunately, wiggling things around. And then I'll lay my stencil down, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to go ahead and snap a little piece of tape here down just so that my stencil also doesn't wiggle around. So I'm going to go ahead and use pine needles for this particular card. Just taking my brush and I'm just doing strokes across instead of in circular motions like we normally do when we make our backgrounds, because I like the effect that that gives. Now you can choose how much you want to use it on this. I like to have it lighter on one side and then darker on towards the top or towards where the stencil is. So I put just a little bit all the way across to give that lighter effect, and then I'm just going to go and brush just along that border of the edging of the stencil. To get that darker effect there. And that's all I'm going to do. That's all I'm going to do for my background. So now I have done one, and I'm going to set it aside and then do another one. So I will do the same thing. Move that up a little bit so you can see it. I'm going to take and move this so now that I have more white space on this particular one. Oops, get that to lay smooth. I'm going to go ahead and kind of wipe off a little bit of the green so it doesn't smear, although it might be kind of pretty with the blue and the green. Then I will switch to my blue and start the whole process over. Now, I actually made a mistake on this one just now, and I'm going to go with it. I got a little bit of the blue ink. I've got some fuzz here on my surface. I got a little bit of the blue ink over onto the other side of the card. So I'm just going to go with that. I don't know where all this fuzz is coming from. Let me see if I can get that. Must be stuck to the tape. Okay, now I'm going to go to the other side since I made that mistake. And just go with it. Again, I'm going to do that same thing where I blend it all out, and then I'm going to go back close to the edge. You can also use a dauber if you would prefer on this particular method, but I kind of like the way that the brush leaves this kind of a nice cool texture look to it. Alright, and then you remove your stencil and you've got another background. So you just do this multiple times. Do all of your backgrounds all at one time. That way you can just move on to the next step and you'll have all these backgrounds ready to do what you want to do. So we'll set that aside, and now we can go ahead and do our stamping. Now, I think what I want to do, I do really like the idea of the water spray. That makes it look like it's stars or snow. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'll just spritz a little bit on there, let it sit for just a moment, and then just lightly dab with my paper towel. Might do just a few more. This one I'm going to go ahead and let it do the big marks so it gives it a little bit of a different look. Then I'll set that one aside, and then I can do the same thing with the blue one. I'm going to get a fresh paper towel. Let it sit for just a moment. And dab it up. Again, I recommend that you do these in doses. So if you're making 10 cards, why don't you go ahead and do the spritzing on all 10 cards. Alright, so now we're ready to do our stamping. So I will take my stamping platform, place my card on it, and let's see, I think I want to use this one first. And again, I'm going to stick with just a very basic design, because the more complicated that you make it, the longer it's going to take, the more steps you have to take, and the point of this is to do these quickly and mass produce what you need to produce, but without making them look like they're mass produced. And the simplest way to do that is to have a simple design. So I'll just press down, making sure that I'm getting good contact. And that's the nice thing about the stamping platform as well, is that you can always go back and re-ink if you just didn't quite get what you wanted on there. Now let's go ahead and put in a second one. Right down here. And again, I'll ink that up. And then I'll go ahead and put on my sentiment. So I think I'm going to use Holiday Cheer on this one. And I think I'll actually go ahead and put that one closer to the bottom. No, I'm going to do it at the top. I'll balance it out a little bit since our trees are closer to the bottom. Got my sentiment. Close that down and press. And that one's done. So then we move on to our next one. Same thing, lay it down in place where we want it. Now this one, if we want to, let's see, shall we switch to a different stamp? Let's try, no, where did I set it? No, thought I had it right here, but apparently I set it aside. There it is. So let's go ahead and pull out the Fairy Fir Tree too. And since we made this interesting little creation here, look how that's just going to fit. Really neat. Right in there. Same thing, stamp up the ink on our stamp. And it looks like for some reason I didn't get quite as much ink over on that far side. That's again, like I said, the nice thing about having a stamping platform. You can go back and re-ink in the places that you don't feel like you got enough ink. one side it looked like to me it was just a little bit darker than the other one. There we go. I'm not sure what I have going on right there. Like a little bitty tiny. Might be something on my stamp. I'll have to clean that off. But anyway, we've got that. Looks like there's a little bead of something on the stamp. Just gonna see if I can wipe that off and re-ink it and see if I got it off. I may have to take this one in and actually wash it. There we go. I think I got it. I think I got it off. At least mostly. All right. And so now we have another one. Let's go ahead and do a sentiment on this one too. And I think I'll just do one right across the top. Let's go with Joy to the World. We're just going to center across the top of our card. Oops. And ink up the sentiment. And there we go. We have that one. So, as you can see, basically what I am doing is just taking each little different background that is actually using the same stencil. How quickly I can do the exact same effect with the same stencil and just switching out a couple of the stamps, and so it goes very, very quickly. So then, let's say I've got all 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, however many I want to make in one sitting all together. So now that I've done that, I'm ready to go ahead and mount them all onto frames. So I'm going to go ahead and just use a running tape to do that. I do want to use a little bit of a white background. It's hard to line up when the black is on top of the black glass. So I'm just put that piece of paper down so I can kind of see what I'm doing. So now I have got my running tape on my card. And forgive me if my head gets in the way here as I try and get this centered on that. Alright, so there's my first one. I'll move on to my second one. And for some reason that card looks like I may not have cut that the right size. Let's try this one and see if that fits a little better. Alright, and now I'll go ahead and put all of them onto their card bases. So I've got blue and I've got green. So I'll grab a blue background and a green background. Okay, and now that one is all done. Now, if you do decide to use your liquid pearls or use any of the sprays, obviously do your spray before you do any of the mounting, so that you only get the spray to be on the card. You don't want it on, obviously, on your border. Well, you might want it on there. I do like to do my liquid pearls as one of the last things, even after I've assembled it. That way that I can set it aside and it can be drying while I'm working on other projects. Alright, so now we will mount this onto our card. Get that centered. All right, and there we go. So now you can see that we have done all of our basic cards the same way, using the exact same stencil, using our handful of different stamps, so that we can do something very quickly and yet they still look unique, even though they're using the same colors and the same basic backgrounds. They still look like they're wonderful, unique cards. Thank you so much for watching my video tutorial today. Remember to check out the DellBellosDesigns.com website for more tutorials on the design team page. Have a great day.